Not every battle is fought on a battlefield. The hardest wars often happen silently within the human heart. We dive into the internal struggles and the quiet victories that define who we truly are. Click subscribe now and join us for these deeply moving and personal tales.
My son-in-law was pouring champagne for everyone at my retirement party when my daughter grabbed my wrist under the table and whispered 4 words that changed everything. "Dad, don't drink that." I thought she was joking. I actually laughed. I looked at her and said, "Sweetheart, it's sparkling cider, not poison." She didn't laugh back. She just stared at me with those eyes. The same eyes her mother had when she knew something was terribly wrong and couldn't yet find the words for it. I set the glass down. That was the night I found out my son-in-law had been planning my death for nearly 8 months. My name is Walter. I am 69 years old. I spent 41 years working as a civil engineer for the county, designing bridges and drainage systems that most people drive over without a second thought. I retired last November. I had a good pension, a paid-off house in Raleigh, North Carolina, and a daughter I was prouder of than anything I had ever built. Her name is Claire. She married a man named Marcus 6 years ago. I walked her down the aisle myself. I shook his hand at the altar and told him he was getting the best person I had ever known. I meant it. I genuinely liked Marcus in those early years. He was charming, well-spoken, drove a nice car, worked in commercial real estate. He always remembered to ask how my knee was doing after my surgery. He called me sir until I told him to stop. My wife Patricia passed away 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. She was gone in 11 weeks from diagnosis. After that, it was just me in the house on Millbrook Road, and Claire started coming by more often. She would bring dinner on Sundays. She would help me sort through her mother's things when I finally had the strength to do it. Marcus came sometimes too, and I was grateful for the company. About 2 years ago, Claire mentioned they were having financial trouble. Marcus had made some bad investments, she said. Some deal that fell through. I did not ask too many questions. I offered to help. I gave them $40,000 from my savings. I told them it was not a loan. I told them family does not keep score. Marcus shook my hand and said he would never forget it. 8 months ago, Claire called me crying. She said things between her and Marcus had gotten worse. He was cold, distant, she said. She felt like he was hiding something. I told her marriages go through seasons. I told her to be patient. I told her I was there if she needed me. I did not know then what she had already started to suspect. My retirement party was held on a Saturday evening at Claire and Marcus's house. They had insisted on hosting it. Marcus had organized everything, the catering, the decorations, a slideshow of photos from my career. There were about 30 people there. Colleagues I had worked with for decades. My neighbor Bill. My brother James, who drove up from Charlotte. It was a warm, generous evening, and I stood in that living room feeling genuinely lucky. Marcus was a perfect host. He moved through the room, refilling glasses, making everyone laugh. He clapped me on the back and gave a toast about what a great man I was. I remember thinking, maybe Claire was wrong. Maybe things were not as bad as she said. When it was time for the champagne toast, Marcus brought a glass specifically to me. He set it in my hand personally. He smiled and said, "This one's for you, sir. Top shelf." I remember thinking it was a kind gesture. Then Claire grabbed my wrist. We stepped into the hallway. She was shaking. She took the glass from my hand and set it on the windowsill, and she said, "I need to show you something. Not here. Not tonight. But Dad, please don't drink anything. Marcus hands you directly. Please." I stared at her. "Claire, what are you talking about?" "I found something," she said, "on his laptop." I wasn't snooping. I was looking for the insurance documents because the car registration was expiring, and I knew he kept everything in that folder, and She stopped. Took a breath. "Dad, I need you to come to the house tomorrow morning when he goes to his Saturday showing. I need to show you what I found." I drove home that night with the radio off. I sat in my driveway for 20 minutes before I went inside. I told myself there was a reasonable explanation. I told myself Claire had been under stress and was not thinking clearly. I went to bed and did not sleep. The next morning, I arrived at their house at 9. Marcus's car was gone. Claire was waiting at the door. She looked like she had not slept either. She sat me down at the kitchen table and opened the laptop. "I found it 3 days ago," she said. "I've been trying to figure out what to do. I didn't want to say anything until I was sure." She turned the screen toward me. It was an email thread. Marcus had a second email account I had never known about. Not the one he used for work or family, a different one with an unfamiliar name. Claire had found it because he had left that browser tab open on the shared laptop. The thread was between Marcus and someone whose name I did not recognize. It spanned 6 months. I read it slowly. Then I read it again. They were discussing my estate. Marcus had told this person, a man who, we later discovered, was a disbarred attorney he had met through a former client, that I had a life insurance policy worth $600,000, that I owned my home outright, and that I had approximately $300,000 in retirement accounts. He knew the exact figures. He had clearly looked through my documents at some point without my knowledge. The emails discussed timelines. One email said, and I am paraphrasing because I cannot bring myself to write it exactly, that the situation needed to happen before I changed my will. Another said that a gradual approach was safer than anything sudden. There was a reference to the supplements that made my stomach drop through the floor. For the past 4 months, Marcus had been giving me a weekly vitamin supplement. He had started it with great care and generosity. He had read an article, he said, about men over 65 and heart health, and he had ordered a specific magnesium and CoQ10 blend. He brought it over every Sunday when Claire came for dinner. He had even set up a little weekly reminder in my phone so I would not forget to take it. I had taken it every single week without question. I looked up from the laptop. Claire was watching me. Her eyes were red. "I had the supplements tested," she said quietly. She slid a piece of paper across the table. She had taken the remaining bottle to a pharmacist friend from her college years who worked at a compounding pharmacy. The friend had run an analysis. The capsules contained a combination that included elevated doses of a compound that, taken consistently over months by someone with my blood pressure history, would significantly increase the risk of cardiac arrhythmia. It was not something that would show up as obvious poisoning. It would look, if anything happened, like a heart attack in an older man with a history of hypertension. Natural causes. My hands were flat on the table. I focused on keeping them still. "How long have you known?" I asked. 3 days, she said. "I barely slept. I didn't know how to tell you. I kept thinking I was wrong, that I was misreading it, that there was some explanation." She pressed her fingers to her mouth. "There's no other explanation, Dad." I wanted to argue with her. I wanted to defend him. I had known this man for 6 years. I had trusted him with my daughter. He had given a toast about me 12 hours ago with a smile on his face. But I sat there reading those emails for a third time, and I could not find a single word that gave me any other interpretation. I said, "Does he know you found this?" "No." "Does anyone else know?" "Only my friend who ran the test. She doesn't know the context." I took a long breath. "Okay," I said. "Here is what we are not going to do. We are not going to confront him. Not today. Not until we have done this correctly." I had spent 41 years working in county government. I knew how documentation worked. I knew that acting impulsively was how people lost cases that should have been airtight. I had watched enough colleagues make decisions in anger that they could not undo. I was not going to do that, not with something this serious. The first call I made was to my own doctor. I told him I had reason to believe I had been ingesting a potentially harmful compound, and I needed a full blood panel and cardiac workup. I did not give him all the details yet. He got me in the following Monday and ran a comprehensive panel. The results came back 48 hours later. There were markers, not catastrophic but present, that indicated my body had been under a specific kind of stress consistent with what Claire's friend had identified. My doctor was deeply concerned and asked me directly what I had been taking. I told him everything. He documented it in my medical record that afternoon and referred me immediately to a cardiologist. The second call was to an attorney. Not just any attorney. My brother James knew a woman named Catherine who had done criminal defense and civil litigation for 30 years. I drove to Charlotte and sat in her office and told her everything. I brought the printed emails Claire had photographed on her phone. I brought the pharmacist's written analysis. I brought the supplement bottle in a Ziploc bag. Catherine listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and said, "Walter, what your son-in-law has been doing constitutes attempted murder. You understand that?" I said I understood. She said we needed to bring this to law enforcement, but that the way we did it mattered enormously. She wanted everything documented before we made any move that could alert Marcus. She contacted a detective she had worked with before in the Wake County Sheriff's Office, a woman named Detective Flores, who handled financial crimes and had crossed into criminal cases before. Over the following 2 weeks, Claire continued living normally in that house. I cannot fully express what it cost her to do that. To sit across from Marcus at dinner. To let him kiss her goodbye in the mornings. To pretend that everything was the same while her father and detective and attorney were quietly building a case. She told me later that she would go to the bathroom and run the water and cry silently, and then dry her face and go back out. I kept taking the supplements. Empty capsules Claire had refilled with real magnesium that she swapped from the bottle each Sunday. We did not want Marcus to notice any change in routine. Detective Flores was thorough. She obtained the financial records for the secondary email account. She traced the disbarred attorney. She discovered that Marcus had taken out a life insurance policy on me 14 months ago as my son-in-law, with my signature, which I had never given, forged on the documents. He had listed himself as partial beneficiary through a clause he'd apparently constructed with the other man's legal knowledge. She also found that he had visited an estate attorney in Durham, under a false pretense, trying to understand whether a son-in-law could challenge a will if the father-in-law died intestate. He had been planning this in various forms for over a year. On a Tuesday morning in February, Marcus left for a property showing at 9 o'clock. 4 minutes after his car turned off our street, 2 officers and Detective Flores knocked on his office door across town. Another 2 officers went to his car. They had a warrant. I was sitting in Catherine's office when Claire called me. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. I asked her if she was safe. She said yes. She said, "They got him, Dad. They got him." Marcus was charged with attempted murder, criminal poisoning, forgery, and fraud. He did not see it coming. When they showed him the evidence, the emails, the pharmacist's analysis, my medical records, the forged insurance documents, the recorded conversations between him and the disbarred attorney that Flores had obtained, his attorney apparently told him that going to trial would be a catastrophic mistake. He pled guilty 4 months later. He was sentenced to 26 years in prison. The judge cited the premeditation, the duration of the scheme, and the particular cruelty of targeting an elderly widower who had given him nothing but trust and generosity. I sat in that courtroom and watched them take him away. I did not feel what I expected to feel. I did not feel triumphant. I felt something quieter and heavier than that. A grief I did not have a clean name for. 6 years of Sunday dinners and handshakes, and a man who called me "Sir" and organized a retirement party for me while planning to use it as cover. I grieved the person I thought he was. I grieved the years Claire lost. I grieved the version of my daughter who used to believe her husband was a good man. Claire filed for divorce before the sentencing. She was back in Raleigh by spring, staying with me in the house on Nobrick Road while she figured out her next steps. We had dinner together most evenings. We watched old movies. Some nights she did not want to talk at all, and I did not make her. Other nights she talked until 1 in the morning about what she had missed, what she blamed herself for not seeing, what it meant to love someone and discover you had loved a mask. I told her the same thing more than once. You trusted him because you are a good person. What he did says everything about who he is. It says nothing about who you are. I have thought about what I would say to someone going through something like this. I have thought about the Sunday mornings I took those capsules without a second thought, because someone I trusted handed them to me with a smile. I have thought about how easy it is to believe the best about the people we love, and how that goodness in us, that willingness to trust, is not a flaw. It is not foolishness. It is what makes us human. But I have also learned something I carry with me now every single day. Your instincts are not nothing. When my daughter grabbed my wrist that night, she did not have all the evidence yet. She did not have the pharmacist's report, or the emails printed out, or the forged signatures. She had a feeling, a persistent, quiet dread that something in her home was not right. She had been ignoring it for weeks, telling herself she was paranoid, that she was being unfair to her husband, that she was letting stress distort her thinking. She almost talked herself out of it. She almost put the laptop away and closed the tab and said nothing. She did not. And because she did not, I am here. Pay attention to the quiet voice. Not the panicked one, not the catastrophizing one, the quiet one. The one that sits in the back of your chest and says something is not adding up here. The one that makes you pause before you drink from the glass someone handed you specifically at a party they specifically organized, when something specifically feels off. Claire never stopped loving her father. She just loved him loudly enough to say something when it was hard and frightening, and she was not completely sure. That is the only reason I am sitting here telling you this story. My name is Walter, I am 69 years old, and I am still here, and I have never in my life been more grateful to have a daughter like mine. If this story moved you at all, if you found yourself thinking about someone you trust, someone you love, someone you hope would speak up for you if they saw something wrong, leave a comment below and tell me. I read every single one. And if you are new here, welcome to the HV-Sweetrevenge family. There are more stories coming. Stay with us.